Good morning, everybody. Next month, our program is going to be on climate change, and we're meeting at Cabrillo College. And it's appropriate that before we get to that meeting, we talk about the question of local energy. I don't have to tell our audience that climate change is really the existential crisis of our time. And certainly the question of where our energy comes from, whether it's sustainable or to what extent it's sustainable, is a central question to the issue of climate change. And we've had, you see these little, there's a good cartoon in the Sentinel this morning of climate change, their local weather, people showing in their sidewalks, snow in Santa Cruz County. That's the tip of the iceberg of a much bigger issue. And that's related to this question of climate change. And there's no question that climate change is driven by human activity, and particularly the question of where our energy resources come from. So I'm really pleased that we're having this program today. It's certainly an important issue, one that I think a lot of us have been following closely. This morning, we're going to hear from 4 different speakers, some briefer than others. The first will be, I'll introduce them in more length just before they speak, but our first speaker will be County Supervisor Bruce McPherson, will give a brief overview, including why community choice energy was such an important policy project. Jimmy Johnson will discuss briefly the 3CE formation process. Catherine Stedman will present a slide deck on 3CE, and Robert Shaw, the CEO of 3CE, will give a wrap up, and then we'll have time for questions from the audience both here and online. I want people to know that we record this program, and it takes us about 3 days to get it up, but after it'll be online through the DWC website. You can see the program and tell your friends about it, and we know that we have something like literally 4 or 5 times more people watching these programs through the recording than actually show up. I think they're busy shoveling their sidewalks this morning or something. So we have a rather small crowd here and even online, but eventually this will be seen by quite a few people. So our first speaker is going to be Bruce McPherson. Bruce McPherson is the Santa Cruz County Supervisor representing the 5th District. Before he was elected supervisor in 2012 and re-elected in 2016 and 2020, he served 2 terms in the California State Assembly and 2 terms in the California State Senate. During his 11 years in the legislature, he served as the chair of several important committees. Nominated by Governor Schwarzenegger and confirmed unanimously by both the Senate and the Assembly, Bruce served as California's Secretary of State in 2005 and 6. He was recognized as Legislator of the Year by numerous organizations and foundations. As a county supervisor, he was the driving force behind the formation of Monterey Bay Community Power, one of the largest and most successful community choice energy agencies in California, and has been a member of the policy board since the agency launched in 2017, serving as chair for several years as a startup. So first we'll hear from Bruce. He's got a microphone, not on. He's going to come up here, but okay, I'll use this one.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for this opportunity to explain 3CE in more detail. It's really a great project, and it was one of the first major projects, actually the major project that I decided to take on when I became a county supervisor, being elected in 2012, as Mike mentioned, and forming the Community Choice Energy Joint Powers Agency that had the potential to really make a difference in the impact of our community and its energy choices. Community choice energy was one of a number of mitigation policies named in all of the county and city climate action plans in the region, because the greenhouse gas issue emission and inventory showed that about half of those came from our use of energy and built environment that we have. And it's the greatest environment anybody could hope for to live in. I know that, in Santa Cruz County being a 4th generation native. The initial aim of community choice energy, or Monterey Bay Community, was to form a joint powers authority, and with the county and the 4 cities of Santa Cruz. But as Mike mentioned, I had spent some time in the don't sound like prison, but 2 terms in the Assembly and 2 terms in the Senate. And I said, I think we can make this bigger. I've represented, and after getting a couple right crosses to the chin, they said, okay, let's go for this, because That kind of a formation had never been done before in the state of California. That included Monterey, San Benito counties, as well as Santa Cruz and all their cities, except for a few, caused by the formation process to take much more time in that effort. We knew that was going to be the case, but we said this is the way we should do it. The county of Santa Cruz executive branch led by Carlos Palacios at the time. He's been fantastic. Our CAO, our county administrative officer, put forth a whole team effort led by my office. And you'll hear from Jenny Johnson, with whom this couldn't have happened, and with the board's acceptance and energetic acceptance of that. After a little more than 4 years of leading the way, I mean, this was not done overnight, for sure. The county was able to hand over a freshly minted joint powers agency with 19 county and city members in the newly formed board of directors and highly qualified CEO, Tom Habashi, to do the rest and the startup work to begin. And as I said, it was different for us to have a tri-county formation in the first place, but it was also different the way we organized ourselves. We had a policy board made up of elected officials. We had an operations board led for the most part by Carlos Palacios, Santa Cruz County CEO, the people that know how the systems works, the details of it. And then we also had a community advisory committee that our outreach to the public. We thought we needed that as well to try to better explain what we're doing, how this works. And that was the first time that kind of a formation of an agency like ours taken place to include all 3 branches, so to speak. Central Coast Community Energy is overall the most successful community choice energy agency in California from the standpoints of customer service, positive environmental impacts, and responsible financial stewardship. By the way, the ability to form these agencies was done through, I think it was 2002 legislation, but it's just really taken hold in the recent years, and there's over 30 community choice agencies in California now. Our agency has reinvested into the communities not only with funding for outstanding projects and programs, but with leadership to make the Central Coast the statewide leader in reducing environmental impacts. And we've given grants for school buses, electric school buses, charging stations, for all kinds of things. So those, you'll hear more about that in more detail. And when I'm asked about the most significant piece of legislation, speaking kind of in a statewide terms, or policy initiatives that I've worked on in my life, this is the most important one I've ever worked on. And it took a huge effort. There were a lot of people that made it work, and it's working very well. And you're going to hear from those who are in our executive offices and our new CEO, the highly qualified Robert Shaw, in a moment. But I know that that both Catherine Stedman, who you're going to hear from after Jenny speaks, and Rob Shaw will be providing much more detail regarding the inspiring environmental goals that we have. It's a tremendously successful effort that we have. We have 440,000 clients now, and we're going to get bigger and better. We now reach from Santa Cruz County down to Santa Barbara County. Geographically, this is CCC, Central Coast Community Energy, is the largest geographical community choice aggregation committee or agency in the state of California, and probably the nation, as far as I know. But with that, I want to introduce somebody who I had the genius to assign, the former Ecology Action Executive Director Jenny Johnson, who attended many meetings along with me. I think before it took us, as I said, 4 years to form this agency. It wasn't just to go to a city council or board of supervisors and have 10 minutes and say, this is how it works, come on board. No, we went back and forth, probably more than 150 meetings overall. But without her at my right-hand side, and the one that I did cure from her right-hand cross when she said we should go from only Santa Cruz County to a tri-county agency at the initiation of this project. Jenny Johnson is just a tremendous asset and former Ecology Action Executive Director. So Jenny, come on up and take the mic.
I would never hit Bruce in person, no matter what. Thank you, Mike, for reminding me. I think if I was married a musician, I'd know how to use a mic, right? So thank you so much, and Bruce, and thanks for the time today, for all of you being here. And in fact, this was a team effort. Yes, it took the political muscle of someone of Bruce's caliber to get in the door and explain what was really sort of a foreign concept to a lot of the members of the public, the cities and the counties we went before, trying to convince them that it was a good thing to do. But we had to have a team of people in the community, and one of them is right here, and I want to introduce him. His name is Chris Danvers. He's in our audience. I was introducing him to folks today. He did the first website for what became Monterey Bay Community Power, because we didn't have any money, and we were bootstrapping the whole thing until Bruce got involved and said, let's make this bigger, and I never did give him a right across it. What this began, when we started our work to educate the community, I quickly learned that this was in 2012, right before I went to work for Bruce. And we did some nascent work before I went to work for Bruce, and then Bruce skyrocketed after his political power and influence. But there were three other efforts before our effort to try to farm community choice energy in our region. Because the legislation had been in place, the enabling legislation, since 2002. So that's really an important thing, because you need to know what didn't work before you start to do what does work. When we started our effort, only one community had formed a community choice energy agency, and that was Marin County. And they had barely been able to form. They had to fight PG&E for many, many years, and after $5 million and a lot of effort, they finally got to form with a few, like 14,000 customers. Could you imagine? That was not very much. They were very big now, but not then. So, when you're in government, government is very risk averse. They don't want to do something somebody else hasn't done already. It says, oh no, that's too innovative. That's too out there. We just thought, well, let somebody else do it first, and then we'll get our toes wet. So the three efforts, and there was one here in Santa Cruz that Mike might have been involved with. I don't know. He's involved with everything. That did help educate the community. They failed in terms of formation, but people were starting to get used to the idea of maybe we really could do this as government, and government can't mess it up. And so when Bruce and I got involved with this issue, we were able to pitch it in a way that took advantage of what didn't work before, but what might resonate with people now. And people were tired of being sort of at the mercy of the investor and utility. They wanted to do something local, where we had local control. We had control over the local money. We could decide on what the mix of the energy was, so we could lower our greenhouse gas. We can invest back into the community, and we can have a local governance board, where if we had a problem, we could go to a local board and say, got a problem, please fix, right? We couldn't do that with PG&E. So this was an opportunity for us to partner with PG&E to deliver better, greener energy, significantly lower our greenhouse gas, as Bruce mentioned. Half of all of the greenhouse gas inventories in the region and the climate action plans that resulted from those inventories identified that energy was half of our greenhouse gas from our built environment. We could make a really big difference if we could do community choice energy and do it in the right way. It did take 150 plus community meetings. We had to go before city and city councils and boards of supervisors multiple times. We had to do a lot of behind the scenes meetings, which I don't count in the 150 meetings. Those were public meetings. So yes, it took us 4 years of meeting with every constituency and stakeholder group in the region. Some of whom would not have let us in the door if not for Bruce McPherson, the former Republican that he had represented them in Sacramento. So we owe him a great debt for getting us in the door with folks who were not particularly environmentally minded. And that was okay. They were interested in the money story though. We can lower our rates, we can have better energy. That sounds interesting. Let's talk about that. Oh, I don't believe in climate change. Yes, I heard that many times. Okay, we won't talk about that. We'll talk about these other things. Because they're also economic benefits to having local control and a local agency. We called it the charm offensive. I'm not sure how charming we were, but we did succeed. After formation, Bruce became the chair of the policy board. And with any business, government or private sector or for-profit business, there's a startup timeframe that is difficult. It was well-funded. The county's, Santa Cruz's executive team, starting with Carlos, our county council, all of our lawyers, our banking people, our finance people, and all came together. And Bruce and I might have been the face of selling it to the community, educating the community, telling them about what the benefits were. But these people on the 5th floor of the county building did all the nuts and bolts work to actually form a very complex joint powers agency, get a bank loan so that the startup team, which did include Rob, it didn't include Catherine, but she's part of the great team now, and Tamabashi, they could actually have the means to go out and procure energy, green energy, and hire staff, etc. So we have a great deal of debt that we owe to the 5th floor of the county of Santa Cruz. The city council of Santa Cruz, very, very supportive. We could have easily done a joint powers agency with our 4 cities and our county in a year. They were all very excited about it because we're very environmentally minded in this county. And we could have done that. And Bruce messed that up, but that's okay. We got Monterey County and San Benito County, and I'm going to give you a couple of the anecdotes, and both of them are interesting, and then I'll stop speaking. So the formation process, bottom line, was very long slog. It was one meeting at a time, one constituency at a time. There was a story to tell to each one of those stakeholders, whether it was environmental, whether it was economic, whether it was local control. All of those benefits to our community we are getting now, and we'll get it for years and years to come because of good financial stewardship of our wonderful executive team at Central Coast Community Energy. But there's 2 small stories I'm going to tell you. The first involves Leon Panetta. You all know him as a famous Democrat from our region. He said to Bruce, how did you get the 3 counties to say yes in all those cities? Nobody gets that. The last JPA that had been formed in this region for Monterey Bay Community Power was the Air Quality Control District and AMDAC. And that had been 40 plus years prior to Monterey Bay Community Power. So Mr. Panetta was not speaking out of turn. How did we do that? I don't know. There was some secret sauce there, but maybe it was meant to be, and there was some luck and a lot of hard work. And you know, as a person who's almost 70, I forgot the other anecdote. Bruce will remember, and he'll tell you later. Anyway, so it's my pleasure to give the mic back to Mike, and he's going to introduce you to the absolutely fabulous staff, Community Choice Energy.
Thanks, Kim. Our next speaker is Catherine Stedman. She is the Director of Communications and Outreach for Central Coast Community Energy, where she oversees customer communications, media relations, and customer service. Prior to joining 3CE in 2022, Ms. Stedman spent 16 years as Manager of External Affairs for California American Water's Central Division Office in the Monterey Peninsula. She represents 3CE as an ex officio member at the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, serves on the Monterey County Economic Development Commission, and on the Board of Directors for the Monterey County Hospitality Association. Ms. Stedman lives in Salinas with her husband, Richard, and beloved Golden Doodle, Kirby. She's going to come up, she's going to give us a slideshow, and just give me a second to turn that on. Uh-oh. Classic. Let me get it. Here we go. Just give me one more second. We're technically challenged here. Just trying to make sure we know how we can advance these slides. I had that a second ago. Where were we?
Thank you. Thank you so much and good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine Stedman. And really just want to thank this group for putting together this forum and providing an opportunity to share more about our agency and then also to hear your question later on.
I have a request from the audience and Zoom people to speak, go through the microphone so it's louder.
Okay. Maybe I don't have the technical competence here. Hang on. So climate change is happening. Not only is it adding to ecological threats, such as wildfires, heat waves, and rising sea levels, it is also displacing people from their homes and jeopardizing food and water supplies. We also know there's a real issue in that acceptance of these facts leads to feeling overwhelmed. What can I, as an individual, do about a problem that is so massive, but that will affect not only me, but my children and future generations? Therapists across the country have seen an uptick in what they call eco-anxiety. But what if there were a world where the problem was being effectively addressed? What if the local elected officials that you do your research on and work to put into office were in fact in charge of making the biggest single contribution our area can make to address climate change, and that your role in making that happen was as simple as flipping a light switch? That, in fact, was the vision that led to the formation of Central Coast Community Energy, and it is a vision that is being realized today. Before 3CE, energy needs in Santa Cruz County and the region were served by PG&E. PG&E, like all electric utility providers in the state, is compelled to increase reliance on renewable energy and decrease reliance on fossil fuels. But your county supervisor, Bruce McPherson, and a collection of local leaders, activists, residents, and other environmentally focused agencies said, "We don't think progress is being made fast enough. We would like to take the matter of where our energy comes from and how much we pay for it into local hands." It took years of effort, but in 2017, a joint powers authority was formed, at that time, Monterey Bay Community Power, with the mission to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, provide affordable, competitive rates, electrify the transportation and building sectors, stimulate and sustain the local economy, and promote rate stability and energy reliability through local control. In the past 5 years, our agency has grown considerably as more and more communities realized that this is a model that works. We changed our name in 2020 to Central Coast Community Energy because today our service goes from Santa Cruz County to Santa Barbara. And during those 5 years, our board, which is made up of local elected officials from the 34 agencies we serve, made some pretty big decisions. The key one being that we would get 100% clean and renewable energy by 2030 and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from 2020 levels. That is 15 years ahead of the state's own ambitious goal. By being a customer of Central Coast Community Energy, each of you is supporting that mission. If you look at your electric bill, it's divided into 3 parts. There are costs for your electric generation, the source, be it solar, wind, or some other resources like natural gas. Today, for the 95% of residents in the county that chose to keep 3CE as their provider, those charges show up on your PG&E bill, but are paid to our agency. The other major portions of your bill are for the transmission and distribution of that energy. That service is provided by PG&E, and your bill contains their charges for it. PG&E is also the provider for natural gas, if you use that in your homes, which in our area would be the 3rd major portion of your bill. When you remit your generation charges to 3CE, you are funding this ambitious, not-for-profit, publicly owned, and government-led effort to make the Central Coast an environmental leader and an example to other communities that renewable power is reliable and it is affordable. Since our formation, we have invested more than $2.1 billion in new build renewable power generation projects. We aren't buying renewable energy credits and attributes to paper over our reliance on fossil fuels. We're actually helping to clean the state's grid by putting new projects online. Here's a look at the projects that the contracts that we have entered into for new projects. 5 of these came online just last year and today are providing 22% of our customers' energy demand. This is exciting because in the beginning we were talking about contracts and documents. Now we're talking about physical projects and actual power being delivered. But there's still a lot of work to do. If you look at what we'll need in renewables to reach our 2030 goal, you'll see that we've made a tremendous amount of progress, but the job is not yet finished. We're currently in talks with offshore wind developers and many others, including energy storage providers, to see that we achieve what our board has instructed. And I want to state that all of this work and investment has been done at cheaper rates than PG&E. Our average residential customer pays 18% less compared to today's PG&E rates. 90% of our budget goes to pay for the power we provide to you. Our operations and programs make up the other 10%. This budget reflects our focus that was set out in the original JPA. Protect our environment, keep decisions local, and work to achieve cost benefits for our region. I joined 3CE at the beginning of last year, and one of the first things I did was commit to doing a research-based customer survey to learn more about the attitudes of the folks that we are truly working for. We just completed this work on January 26th, and I want to share that the results show our customers' priorities. Keep the lights on, don't charge me too much, and please help our environment. I am so proud of our customers for universally identifying the urgency of moving to renewable energy as a priority. And if you'll look at this slide, you'll see a very important finding, which is that Santa Cruz County is awesome. In 3 separate areas, you're looking at sustainability and specifically climate change, addressing climate impacts as top priorities. And getting this type of feedback from our customers really matters. It's important to our board and to our ability to stay true to our original mission to ensure that the work that we're doing aligns with the interests and the goals of the communities that we serve. In doing this, we also recognize that beyond moving to clean electricity, there are other changes that we need to make as a region to truly address the issue of climate change. We need to get out of gas-burning cars and into electric vehicles. We need to heat our buildings and the water in our showers with clean electricity, not fossil fuels. These are choices that can be made at the individual level. Sitting here today, one of the most impactful things that you can do to decrease our region's use of polluting sources of energy is to support your government officials' decision to form a local agency that can take on these large-scale priorities and challenges. But in terms of rounding out that impact through individual action, that is something that our agency was also designed to support. Since our formation, we have given substantial rebates for the purchase of 1,200 electric vehicles. We have funded over 900 EV chargers for public use and individuals' homes and businesses. We've also funded needed electrical upgrades to make the installation of this technology possible. We've helped fund 20 electric school buses, so our children aren't breathing in diesel fumes and our community's air is cleaner. 15 of these buses are for Title I schools and school districts that have Title I schools. We put money toward the electrification of 2,000 affordable housing units. We've also funded 60 agricultural electrification projects, improving working conditions for ag workers across the Central Coast by eliminating fossil fuel powered ag equipment. Half of those projects were for small businesses. Lastly, we've helped our member agencies pass more environmentally progressive building codes and buy EVs and EV chargers to serve their communities. Collectively, these programs have resulted in an estimated avoided emissions of more than 6,000 metric tons of carbon each year. But do the people that live here know that when they flip on their lights, they are supporting an effective and well thought out strategy to do our part as a region to combat climate change? Do they know that just by being our customers, they are doing their part? That in the face of seeming hopelessness, action is being taken and that all of you are a part of it? The answer is that at best, maybe 9% of our customers know. But my call to action to all of you today is to help spread the word. Support CCAs, take advantage of our programs, let your friends, your neighbors, and your colleagues know that they are part of a solution. They are paying less while achieving the environmental outcomes that matter so much to our communities. It's really remarkable the amount of change that's occurred in our energy landscape over the past 5 years. And all of that is a credit to the local policymakers that groups like yours help to get elected and who depend so much on your continued engagement and support. So with that, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to share our agency's story. And I'll turn it over again to introduce Ron.
Give me a moment. Last but not least, our final speaker, Robert Shaw, is the incoming Chief Executive Officer for Central Coast Community Energy, where he has previously served as the Chief Operations Officer and General Counsel. Mr. Shaw is Deputy County Counsel for the County of Monterey from 2017 to 2019, In addition to his years as an associate at some of California's most respected law firms, Mr. Shaw works as the assistant to the director of public works for the city of Long Beach. During his time with 3CE, Robert Shaw has successfully secured an innovative mix of 950 megawatts of wholesale renewable generation and 243 megawatts of energy storage projects. He fundamentally transformed the agency's energy programs portfolio, increasing spending from $330,000 in 2017 to nearly $20 million in 2020 to 2022. Mr. Shaw serves on the board of directors of the California Community Choice Association, as well as the board of directors of Castle of Monterey County. He currently resides in Aptos with his wife Melissa and their 2 children. Robert Shaw.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to sit, I don't have a presentation. I wanted to invite a little bit more of a discussion. So I'm going to sit, and I hope that's okay. And I want to thank Mike and Carol for the invitation to come here. And I really want to thank the Democratic Women's Club. This is a really important organization. And I just want to say, as you all know already, every election matters. Clubs and committees like this keep people engaged and keep people's voices at the forefront, and it's critically important. So just thank you for all of the work that you do in the community, and I really encourage everybody to stay engaged as we continue to move through these next 2 years at the federal level and all of those important local elections as well. You know, Catherine alluded to it, and when we at the COP summit, the climate summit in the fall, I think the UN Associate General had said, we are on a highway to climate hell and our foot is on the accelerator. And he's really right. But importantly, in these 5 counties, because of the vision of someone like Bruce McPherson, the work because of someone like Ginny Johnson, and the passion of our communities, we are doing something about that. So in these 5 counties, in every CCA jurisdiction in California, there are organizations and policymakers and staff really working towards how do we address decarbonization? How do we get in front of this climate crisis that we're all facing every day? It's occurring in California. We live on the coast and we're seeing the effects of it really every single day. So I want to thank Bruce and Ginny and our communities for all of the work to get this agency up and running. Thank you. That pathway is really pretty simple. It's the pathway to decarbonization. You decarbonize the electric grid. You move to 100% clean and renewable as fast as you possibly can. You use that decarbonized electricity and you electrify everything. Our cars, our stoves, our industrial processes. And then you focus on policy and industrial organization, industrial processing that isn't as easy to move. And that's it. It's really not that difficult. And what this agency's been able to prove is that you can do that more cost effectively. You can actually save money by focusing on clean and renewable technologies. It's difficult at the actual level of making this happen and going out procuring the energy and navigating the regulatory space, navigating the energy markets. But the pathway's laid out. It's really quite simple. And I think our policy board has given us that direction, get to clean and renewable as quickly as you can. And our communities are beginning to take advantage of those community programs. So in the past, when we were designing community programs, we were thinking, what is the program that we believe is going to be the right approach? And now the community programs are community, tell us where you want to engage, and we'll design a program and an opportunity for you to take advantage of that. We've been looking at that and it's been very successful. And every single year we will stop, we'll look at last year's performance of our programs. We'll say, what needs to change? How can we make these more accessible to everybody? How do we ensure that every single program has a measure in it that addresses equity? How do we make sure that we're not leaving community members behind, that we're building infrastructure in low-income communities, that we're building access to electrification, and that we're doing it with 2 real important bumpers. One is reliability. You must have the lights on all the time. So you can move to clean and renewable as fast as you can, and we are doing that. But you've got to do it with a mix that allows you to keep lights on. So we're doing that by looking at geothermal, which is a baseload 24/7 resource. We're looking at it by doing and pairing batteries with every solar project that we're doing. I think we have one solar project that doesn't have a battery tied to it. We're doing it by looking at onshore wind and offshore wind. These are complementary load profiles or generation profiles that complement when the sun's not shining. We've got to look at other baseload resources and emerging technologies. We've got to do it with a really diverse battery fleet. Lithium ion 4-hour batteries are not the answer for every solution. They're an important part of it. They ramp quickly, and when the grid demands it, you can turn them around and you can dispatch energy very fast. But you need long duration storage, and you need different technologies that don't have some of the risks that lithium have. Not just thermal events we've seen at Moss Landing, but also the demand for lithium, where it's being mined from. So an innovative project that our board really directed us and said, we know it's going to be more expensive, but we need different technologies. We want you to look at those. And we brought forward a compressed air project. It's a long duration discharge. It's a new technology, it's emerging, and it's going to be tremendous for the California grid. And it's because local officials were willing to look at that and say, this is an investment that's important for us. The other factor is cost. If you drive electricity prices too high, people will not electrify. If it is cheaper to drive their car with an electric or a combustion engine, or cook on a stovetop that is fueled from gas instead of electricity, they will not move. And we've got to look at really our low-income communities. We've got to look at the Salinas Valley, and we've got to look at areas of Watsonville, and we've got to say, how can we encourage these communities to make that jump? And electrification will happen, but if cost becomes the decision factor, then you will never get to 100%. You always have some component that won't make that switch. So we've got to be able to deliver our resources in a way that is the lowest cost of energy for our customers. And in this agency, I'm really proud to say, it doesn't matter how you measure success, we've been there. So we can talk about 430 customer accounts. I don't really care about accounts, and I don't talk about accounts. That's 1.5 million people. Those are people, those are families, and they are being served by us. Their account that we look at and see the meter, that doesn't matter. What matters is the number of cars that we're subsidizing. It's the number of low-income housing that gets developed. It's regional solutions around things like supporting our ag industry, electrifying and moving towards less emitting pumping infrastructure. It's building out low-income housing so that we can address our housing crises and doing it cost effectively. So if you look at rates and a levelized cost of energy, we have some of the lowest rates in California. We have the lowest cost of energy of any comparable CCA. If you say, well, I really want to focus on what are the programs doing and how are we helping individuals be a part of the solution? We have some of the most aggressive funding for programs of any CCA, comparable size and revenue, comparable size and number of customers being served. We fund programs at a higher level than any of them, and our programs are more diverse. There's a better number of them, and we're actually delivering results with all of them. And if they're not delivering, we're going to come back and say, how can we make this better? And if it's not the right program for us, we'll change to a different one. And we're doing all of that in a way that I think is being responsive to the community. And as I come in as the new CEO, it's really an opportunity to take a pause, listen to communities, work with groups like Ecology Action and the Center for Environmental Communities in Santa Barbara, and with 3C Ren, and think about how can we address some of these regional issues. Right at the forefront for 3CE right now is a discussion in San Luis Obispo County. They are the one remaining jurisdiction in the 5 counties that is not publicly controlled. Lompoc, I apologize for the mispronunciation, has its own publicly owned utility district. King City has its own CCA. The city of Santa Barbara has its own CCA. Everybody else works with Central Coast Community Energy, and their voice is being heard at our policy board, our operations board, and our CAC, the county of San Luis Obispo is an important discussion. They need to make that local decision for themselves about whether or not this is the right place for them. But I think it is the right place, and it's going to be important for the community to have that single voice local control. But that's it. That's the end of 3CE's growth. And at that point, we're really focusing on trying to operationalize and kind of steady how we're delivering that service and improving all of the time. So there are certainly challenges out there, and they're sometimes very technical, and I'm happy to talk about those, but I kind of want to stop and invite some questions, and I'm happy to take the mic. I don't know how you want to run that. Yeah.
So I'll take the privilege as the moderator of asking the first question.
Thank you.
And I'll go around, bring the mic to people in the audience here, and then we'll hear from questions from people who are watching online. So I want to start, because it's a controversial question, by making clear that we all appreciate the work that PG&E workers have done in the current emergencies we've been confronted. They do fantastic work, and no solution is acceptable that doesn't keep their jobs and keep them rewarded for the work that they do. Here's my question. It appears, so only appearance, that as the provision of energy through 3CE has brought the price down relative to PG&E costs, and brought a much better mix of renewables into the situation, PG&E is still responsible for transmission. And it appears that maybe what's happening, maybe, because you may know a lot more about this than I do, that PG&E has simply shifted its profit centers over to transmission. And that in fact, the PG&E, the Public Utilities Commission that regulates their rates, is allowing them to do this, that the reason people are seeing high energy bills, despite all the success of your agency, our agency, is that PG&E is simply taking a higher rate of profit on their transmission. And so the overall bill that you get is a higher bill than it was before. This might lead one to think maybe we also have to make transmission part of the public agency mission, and not simply have it be the provision of the energy. And I'm curious about your views, any of you on the panel here, about whether the appearance that that's going on is accurate, or maybe that's just feels that way to me and some of my friends, or and again, if it is the case, what do you see as a solution to that problem?
Mike, that's an incredible question, and it's right on. And I first want to start by thanking you for correcting yourself. It really is your organization. So I think there's two pieces. One, the energy market is in turmoil. We are seeing highs that we haven't seen in more than 20 years for natural gas, for some of the renewable energy costs. The market costs are increasing dramatically. I will say that we now, as CCAs, as public powered or community aggregators, make up 60% of PG&E's load. So they now only serve 40% of the customers they used to serve. They haven't built a new generation facility, to my knowledge, since before 2017. The last one I'm aware of is a battery project in Moss Landing, so that's not generation. So those costs are still there, that they have all of that utility-owned generation, and then there's old procurement. But now they're more exposed to the market costs because they're not building new resources. So from the PG&E generation, and if you're a 3CE customer, you're not feeling this because our rates have been able to be maintained, but they are much more exposed. So their cost increases are happening on both sides of the table. Those market impacts are real, and we feel them as well, and we're managing them the best that we can. On the transmission and distribution side, you're right. It's not a new profit center for them. It has always been the profit center for the IOUs. And it's not hard to think about. If you have a mile of transmission line and you serve a single customer, you have built that, and it costs the same for a mile of transmission line that serves 100,000 customers if you're in a very dense area. So transmission has always been the IOU's profit center. I look at the IOUs as a partner. So we need them as a partner moving forward, but I think transmission and distribution is where they should be focused. They're also going through a transition, and their new president has been very vocal about the need to make improvements in safety, and the commission has kind of directed that of them as well. So they're doing a lot of undergrounding. They need to do a lot of infrastructure upgrades. We're experiencing in Santa Cruz County a lot of the, not power safety shutoffs anymore, but it's the fast trip system that prevent lines from causing fires as they fall. Those upgrades are really, really necessary. And PG&E has been very much behind the curve in upgrading their design standards for telephone poles withstand stronger winds, lines to be able to shut off, segmenting their grid, and they're making those investments. And I think that's what you're seeing in terms of their transmission costs that are increasing. To the question of, should we look at public ownership over those transmission lines? I would say that there are some entities, some CCAs that are looking at that aggressively. San Francisco has actually made an open bid for the transmission system. San Jose has looked at it as well. And what's interesting about both of those of you have highly dense cities, right? So again, profit margin on the transmission is going to be much, much higher. There are also cities that can handle the build out of the thousands of workers and the trucks that need to roll. In our 8,000 square miles of service territory, we have a much more rural area. So those investments, I think, are going to be much, much higher. And then the risk and liabilities associated with maintaining and operating that are much, much higher. So I don't think that from a 3CE standpoint that we would ever look at taking that on. I think the PG&E jobs are in transmission and distribution. There's a lot more build out that's going to be necessary. As we get to 100% clean and renewable, we need interconnections to be sped up. We need to build out service delivery on the PG&E side of the meter so that we can serve the electrification load that we're going to have. And we need transmission to bring power into our load centers, because it's very, very difficult to develop here locally because of the cost of demand. So I apologize if that's a little bit too ranging,
No worries.
but thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with questions from those in the room. Raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you. I'm going to hold on to it though.
Thank you. Hi, and thank you for the presentation. My name is Carol Heyman. How are you? I'll tell you a little bit about myself, just so you know, I'm not a climate denier. I was an early solar adopter. I have a hybrid. I started and ran 2 green career training programs for high school students, environmental education programs in Santa Cruz County. I'm all about the mission. I have 2 specific questions for you though. One is about generation and one is about infrastructure. So when I first became aware that we were all being transitioned to 3CE, I'm really interested in climate change, and I read about it all the time. I try to educate myself as much as possible. And so I did as deep a dive as I could into specifically energy content and generation with 3CE. And I called several times to try and get answers about specifically generation, large hydro, which at the time was the biggest number. I was pretty frustrated by the inability to get specific answers. And so then I did my own research. And when I discovered that actually PG&E's greenhouse gas generation is significantly lower than 3CE's, I switched back to PG&E. So I want to ask about that. I follow your generation content grid every year. I noticed that it was about 50% large hydro and 11% unspecified. Now it's 50% unspecified and 11% hydro. And as I've dug into the unspecified piece, I am understanding that a lot of that energy is purchased from even outside the country, that a lot of it is natural gas generated. So I'm concerned about transparency, I guess, and where your power really comes from and that unspecified piece. So that's my one question. My second question is around infrastructure. So as we electrify everything, which I'm all about, especially for new construction, transportation makes total sense. the California Energy Commission says that just for the EV goals themselves, we're gonna have to generate 3 times more electricity than we do now. And I have a concern if we're eliminating natural gas, we're eliminating nuclear, what's that gonna look like? And I hope you would be able to speak to that. Thank you. Sorry, that's long.
Carol, thank you. And it's a great question, both of them. And let me start by saying, I really do apologize that your experience was frustrating and you didn't feel like you got the answers that you were looking for. So let me do my best to answer them. The power content label is, in my view, this may be controversial, it is a regulatory accounting scheme. It has nothing to do with our power content mix. So let me explain that and pull the layer back a little bit. So again, I just mentioned that PG&E's level of load has dropped from 100% to now only 40%, but their power content level hasn't changed. They haven't bought new resources. So what they had before is what they have today. Some resources may have come off. We have bought near 1,000 megawatts of new clean and renewable generating. It's all what we call RPS. So those are new resources on the grid. It is no surprise to any of you, I'm sure, that there aren't green electrons that come from solar fields and brown electrons that come from natural gas. It is just electrons, and I can't guarantee that the electron that's serving any particular load is coming from any particular source. Electricity flows like water in the path of least resistance. So with that sort of setting point, I call it a regulatory scheme, accounting scheme, because when you fill out your power content label, the CEC says very specifically, here's how you account. You must report your solar, and then your wind, and then your geothermal, and then your biogas or biomass. After that, now you can report on your small hydro, and then large hydro, and then your nuclear content, and then you report on your natural gas. So it's a very specific how you report on that. And you only report to 100% of retail sales. So that means I'm only reporting what I actually sell to customers. PG&E, I just said, has only 40% of their load. So their power content mix has a lot more than what they sell to customers. So they start with their RPS, their clean and renewable resources, and then their nuclear resources, and that's it. Because once you include Diablo Canyon, that is the end of their retail sales. They still own, as part of their mix, 26% of their portfolio is natural gas plants. And all of those plants are still running. So the the power content label accounting doesn't account for that. It's just the regulatory structure sets that up that way that you don't account for it. Our power content label, we've had in the past, and you mentioned that we had this large hydro that was 50%. That's true, that's the way the power content label was set up. But what that input was, that large hydro is not what California considers to be clean and renewable. That's a policy decision about what we call the resource RPS, the resource standards portfolio. Large hydro doesn't count. But it does count to offset emissions. So you can buy these certificates that are produced from large hydro that say, hey, there was a megawatt of this resource that's greenhouse gas free, and you can use that certificate in your power content label. Again, it's a regulatory accounting scheme. And when we first started, it was important, I think, to say, we're going to be 100% clean and renewable. We used those certificates to offset that unspecified power that we were using to really balance out how we served customers. And we had the foresight, again, by someone like Bruce McPherson and the rest of our policy board. And I'm so glad that we made this transition to say, that's not actually an environmental change. That's not doing anything. Those dams that are running in the Northwest are still going to run. And whether we use a certificate to greenwash our power content label is not making an environmental change. So don't do it. Don't buy them anymore. We don't buy them anymore. And now we're rushing to 100% clean and renewable by 2030. And that means building out generation sources and building out batteries so that we can get there. Catherine showed the target there. We're still on track. We're going to get to 2030, 100%. We've got to buy new resources over these next couple of years and get them online. That is environmental change, a new resource generating renewable energy, putting more green power. I just said we don't have green electrons, but green power onto that grid mix. So that's the answer to the power content label in my vision is that certificate means nothing. It's not doing anything. What does do something is building a new resource, and that's what we're doing, thanks to our policy board and their direction. Now let me take the unspecified power piece. Unspecified power is exactly that. It's unspecified. So again, it flows like water. So it is not coming from outside of the country. It's not coming from outside of California. It depends in the middle of the timing of the day. In the middle of the day, it's likely a lot of solar resources because we over generate in the middle of the day, and a lot of that energy gets grounded because it's too expensive to put it on the grid. And it's also a lot of Diablo Canyon. I mean, we don't buy the power from Diablo Canyon. We buy what are called intrascheduler transfers. So we buy it from other power servicers that put it onto the grid. But again, electricity flows like water. That's likely where it comes from in our region. But the unspecified power is what we use to make sure that when the sun's not shining, the wind isn't blowing, and we're still getting to all of our resources developed. And that's what we're trying to do, is bring down the amount of unspecified power that we actually utilize, and for the amount that we do utilize, that is more green. So we're bringing the overall emission production that comes from electricity statewide down by putting new resources on the grid. In terms of infrastructure, we do need a lot more infrastructure. We need a lot more build out of transmission capacity and the capacity to be able to deliver to customers. And as I was telling Mike, that's an area that the utilities do need to continue building out. So it gets a little bit technical, and I'm sorry to be maybe too wonky, but I think the takeaway is there aren't green and brown electrons. The power content label, well, it's, I think, looked at by the community as a reflection of what's going on, understanding that it is a regulatory structure. It's not necessarily the mix, but for us, we are building new resources. So if you look at, that utility-owned generation component of PG&E, that doesn't translate for us. Our power content label really doesn't change if you stop at retail sales or anything else, because we are building new resources and delivering them. We have zero natural gas. We don't buy any nuclear energy. We don't buy energy from large hydro. We're focused on RPS, and we do use unspecified power in order to balance out the grid.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more from the audience here, and then I'll take two from the chat, come back to the room. I'll go to this gentleman here.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for the presentation. My name is Eric Brodberg. You lowered me? Yeah, thanks. And I have 3 points I want to follow up on Carol's, but maybe an easy question. I am the recipient of 3 of your EV credits or rebates, which I greatly appreciate. I also own a 7-unit residential property here in Santa Cruz in the city, and it's got a modern 400 amp service with 9 separate meter sockets. They're all individually metered, and there's a big one. And several times I've called to try to get it going it's a nice little residential project for EV chargers. And you guys don't really have the turnkey integrated support. I'm actually a handyman. I know how to do residential wiring, and I've done a lot of building, and I understand it's not something, first of all, I don't have an electrical contractor's license, so I probably couldn't even get a permit if I wanted to do it myself, but it's a project I need someone, a contractor, to come in and just take care of it. And I have the infrastructure. I've even talked to PG&E about it, and you guys, I can just tell you, you're really not set up. You don't have, I'm like, well, can I get a list of electrical contractors that are ready to go? And so just from I appreciate all those programs you have, but I think they're not really, for the thing where you buy an electric car charger, you say, $400 rebate, that's easy. But for something like this, if you really want to make that happen, you need to step up your game. Okay, so that's the easy one. Now for the harder ones. I'm going to follow up on what Carol said. I have the 2021 power content label, which you just said wasn't worth much, but for PG&Es, it says natural gas is 8.9%, not 26%. So I don't know if that's changed or it didn't, maybe we want to get wonky together after the presentation, but I do have some concerns. Just as first of all, I greatly appreciate that you acknowledged that the large hydro was an accounting greenwashing thing, and I really hated that. So I'm glad you got rid of that. But I think, I looked before I came here. I looked at your website, and this is something on your website. It's about new projects that you've invested in. I think most of them aren't. They're maybe in the planning process, or they're not actually online, most of them, but almost all of them are outside of, for sure, Santa Cruz County, and most of them even outside your service area. So as you mentioned, electrons, they don't care, electricity will flow to the path of this particular. So you guys put a bunch of money into all these projects, and maybe they're putting more green electricity on the grid, but we're still getting the power, the peaker power from the natural gas plants from Diablo Canyon. We're not necessarily, maybe it's good for the country or California, the Western grid, but I don't know that the generation is, people don't understand this. They think, free CE, they're generating power and we're getting clean power. That's not how it works. And so I think, I don't know, I don't think that's really clear. And then, the big question I have is on building electrification. Now I know there's a big push for it. I have a 1950 house that has the original panel. It's a 70 amp panel, which is not sufficient. So I put in a building application for a 200 amp panel upgrade, June of 2022. PG&E, it's going to put your neighborhood out of tolerance. So we'll get back to you in 6 to 8 months. Now they're telling me May 1st, they're going to do their work, put a new transformer in, and then I can go ahead and, my building permit would have expired after 6 months. So, and I live 1 block away from Bay Mission, which is the busiest intersection in the whole county. I'm not in a remote area. So you guys and the city is pushing building electrification. We do not have the infrastructure. Yeah, I have to tell you, this is just me, one little house, but you want to do it on a systemic basis, you're putting the cart before the horse. You need to do an inventory with PG&E, street by street, make sure, see what they need to do locally. I'm not even talking about transmission, just talking local distribution. We don't have the capacity, and I think you really need to work with the cities before you push this further, because the city now, not only are they doing new building electrification, but there's a roadmap to force people to convert existing buildings to all electric, and we don't have the capacity. So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments. And the questions. Let me say, I think you got it. I think it is clear. I think on the power content label, you're right. And I'm happy to talk to you about the 26%. Again, it's what they own versus what they use to service retail customers. So there's more generation that they own and operate. The building electrification is the hardest area to move forward. I will say we have used a program this year that's integrated with the state's clean tech program. And the state administers the program. And I think both, if John Greaser, our program director, was here, he would agree that it's been frustrating working closely with the state. And we've heard from other folks like yourself who said, I can do some of this work myself. And even licensed contractors that said, I can do this work. Why do I need to go out and work with one of these certified vendors? So I think that program design can change in the future, and we could look at other ways to approach that. So I really appreciate that feedback. The challenges around the infrastructure, we just had this workshop where we invited Southern California Edison and PG&E to come to our community advisory council and talk specifically about this. And they talked a lot about, we are spending $4 billion in our service territories to upgrade capacity, to build out new transmission. And while that seems like a big number, it's woefully underfunding the need. So we also heard from them, and what we've noticed is the response times in terms of building out new substations, building out additional transmission capacity to serve at the distribution level has grown from, a 1-year process to a 3-year process. Substations used to take a couple of years. Now they're taking 8 years. We actually heard from PG&E representatives saying effectively, tell me what you're going to do in 8 years and we'll be ready for you. And I think that's just woefully that's not enough. That's a ridiculous planning approach, right? We know we're electrifying. Carol had mentioned the CEC studies. The IOUs need to say there's a baseline of service that we have to get to and start moving in that. And they can prioritize. And I think it is important for us, and we've invited them to be a part of this conversation so that we can prioritize where their focus should be and where our focus should be in building out the electrification infrastructure. But we need them to look at it as, it's not, how do I respond to a specific request at a specific address? How do they bring the entire distribution system up to a level that can service? It is an important conversation. I really invite you to engage with the CAC. We are going through what we're now calling, we're trying a new acronym, but it is the Regional Electrification Strategic Plan. And it is focused around, if we're going to electrify transportation specifically, what's our role as 3CE? What's the IOU's role in building out the capacity? What are our member agencies' role? Maybe, I don't want to put the cart before the horse in supposing what that study is going to end at, but I'm going to suppose that it's going to say, if we're talking about building out charging capacity in right-of-ways, that really needs to rest with the jurisdictions, with the cities. If it's about siting charging capacity at office locations so people can charge in the middle of the day when solar's generating, that may sit with us because we can work with businesses more directly. But the planning of the transmission side, that is our IOU partners. We need them to step up around that. We'll be pushing at the CPUC. We'll be working with our colleagues in the IOUs to move that conversation forward. So all of that does need to happen. I completely agree with you. There was a piece that I wanted to address in your comments as well. Oh, your focus on your multi-housing electrification. First of all, thank you for looking for that, because it's critical to make sure that we're bringing along everybody. And you can't charge if you're in an apartment building. You oftentimes don't have charging capacity, so it's really important. We are moving forward with more concierge level service. I wish John were here that he could walk through what that's going to look like, but for multi-housing developments, we're bringing in an administrator to help work hand in hand to navigate the IOU process. That process is still going to be there. It's still going to be arduous. I'm certain will work, and I'll happily call my colleagues in the IOUs to suggest that they prioritize some of this work and fund it. They've got to fund it, and the commission has to tell them to fund it, because they're not going to do anything that they can't collect in their rates. So we need to push the commission that this is a priority. But I'll take your information at the end of this and make sure John reaches out in terms of what that concierge service will look like.
Just one real quick follow-up. I'm sorry, Mike. On the infrastructure and building electrification, like I said, the city of Santa Cruz is currently developing ordinances to mandate existing buildings go all electric. And there's no inventory of the existing infrastructure. And I know that you're not the city of Santa Cruz, but you're pushing that too, and it's just not going to work. It's going to be worse because people are going to be really pissed off because they have to wait 12 months before they can even get PG&E. So I think that needs to be integrated with the cities who are taking aggressive stances, like the city of Santa Cruz.
Two from online questions. Okay, we'll take a couple online questions. This is from Jonathan Collins. And again, I'm just going to read directly from the chat. And so Jonathan says, while 3CE has obtained many good milestones, there are several flaws. The choice of December as the end of the net metering cycle demonstrates the 3CE board's lack of knowledge about solar. For anyone with that experience would never choose the darkest month of the year to true up. That decision guarantees NEM customers will have expensive bills in January and February. Will you change the annual true up to April 1st? And then there's a quote from a 3CE email. When we instituted a standard annual true up month, the majority of our customers received true ups in October, January, and March. Therefore, December was designated as the least impactful month across all existing customers' true up dates. So I guess the question is, will you change the annual true up to April 1st?
I'm happy to look at that. I mean, I will say in moving to a single true update, there is a component of it's disruptive whenever you make that first change and you're doing that first time. But year after year, it doesn't change your energy credits or generation from, if you have rooftop solar. So year after year, it will normalize. I would say that making changes so close, it's the changes that are disruptive. So we'll look at it with our finance directors as we move forward, but having a system that's easy to administer, that we can be responsive to, it will normalize over time.
Okay, and next question, this is from Ray Hill. One of the considerations I hear when people are thinking about renewable options is getting locked into a plan that won't let them change. For example, if one hopes to be able to afford solar panels in 3 years, will becoming a 3CE customer impede that?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I will say, your individual choices about whether or not you want to use solar on your rooftop. We have one of the highest net surplus compensation rates of any of the CCAs, and it's about roughly 3 times 20 times higher than PG&E's. So if you want to make that change, there are changes that are happening at the CPUC. I'm sure you've all heard about NEM 3.0, and that's going to change calculations for individual homeowners. But we still support that decision that individuals will make. And we're still going to have that higher net surplus compensation for whenever you do get to that true up if you are generating. But I should say the program is available to all of our customers. I think a lot of folks do have this question of, if I become a 3CE customer, can I still be on the net energy metering tariff? Yes, you can. There's no disruption to that. We administer it in line with the same time of use structure that the IOUs do, but we do administer our program in our own fashion.
Are there other questions?
With the state's desire to go electrify for vehicles and such and buildings, and the limited ability to generate new power, I mean, if it's solar or whatever, it takes time, it takes money. Has there been really analysis done on what the possible economic requirements are to meet the state standards? And also the technical ability to do that, and the supply ability, because there can only be an increase in solar panel construction or building by a certain amount and a certain time frame, and also with the vehicle conversions and putting in the infrastructure and that. And it's a lot of electricity, as I said, 3 times as much. Has somebody done the math and seen, can you even achieve it?
No, that's a great question. And from my standpoint, my role in this is getting those generation resources online as quickly as possible. And I think we can. I think we can achieve those levels. We need partnerships from the IOUs. You'll see the CCAs, I think, aggressively looking at the commission and the California Independent System Operator for greater coordination around transmission planning, around interconnections, helping to get projects online quickly. Because it is an issue. I can enter into an agreement today, and I may not see that project come online until 2026 or 2027. I will say that because of our 100% clean and renewable goals, we're going to be well above what we need to necessarily just service any customers. but we're going to get to a point where we can serve our retail load and then try to balance monthly. So you can talk about retail loads in an annual strip. And that's a much different calculation than when you're doing it and you're trying to balance your renewable energy demands with your generation supply every single month. And that's the important piece. And that means batteries. It's not a generation question anymore. It's about how do you get that generation from the middle of the day and service it 24 hours a day. It's really a storage and a battery technology challenge and a new technology. There's something there that's going to be emerging that's going to help us make this jump. Your specific question, is there an analysis that the state has done? The CEC has looked at this. I don't know that they've put a cost number to it, but they've looked at it from a standpoint of, can we get resources online? And actually the number of resources for electrification is not that significant in terms of the ability to bring those projects online, but we do need better coordination. And we need better coordination between the federal government and the state government on offshore wind as well. So transmission line planning and offshore wind generation are critical, and then the battery storage component.
Other questions from the audience?
Compared to the questions you've been getting, this is very unsophisticated, but right now out in the mountains are a lot of people without power. I live in town, but I have a 1929 gas powered house. So I have heat, and I'm not without power, but batteries that can store for, in that first rainstorm, I taught how to friend who they were without power 9 days. So how do you keep people warm and, old people, especially children? Batteries can't really do that.
No, I think it's a great question. And again, that there's two bumpers, right? Reliability, keep the lights on, and cost. So we've got to have partnerships with the IOUs. And I know I sound a little bit like I'm passing the buck to the IOUs, but they own the lines and the transmission. My role is to be in front of the regulators and the legislative decision makers and say, this is critical, and we have to see some improvements here. So I know that our policy makers in Santa Cruz County and those that represent that area, this is critical to them, and they'll be thinking about it. My space, I think about reliability when I think of my 1.5 million customers, and I try to come up with reliability solutions that make a 30,000 customer, a 50,000 customer solution. So as part of that, it's about backup generation, renewable generation at substations. So the substation can't be energized, but how do you serve that distribution system that's downstream from that substation? So that's an area of solution. Microgrid development is an area of solution. Working closely with our member agencies to put small batteries on distribution lines that can serve critical load and serve whatever's on that distribution line if safe, right? I do want to be mindful that sometimes when the IOU shut down the lines, it's because of a safety issue. We don't want to contribute to a risk. So it's a multifaceted problem. There are solutions around that. My role in that is being in front of the regulators and the legislators, and then find solutions that help us serve the maximum number of customers as cost effectively as we can. And that's about substation backup generation, small distributed batteries everywhere through our service territory. We're working on projects that are very hard to develop. The goal is to get 200 megawatts of batteries in the 3 to 5 megawatt range, spread throughout our service territory. And we've got 3 here in Santa Cruz County, 2 in San Benito County, and 1 in Santa Barbara County, and there's a couple in Monterey as well, that we're really pushing forward, but they're hard to develop. And finding a way to work with the IOUs such that when the grid is down, making sure that those can continue to serve behind the meter and keep those critical resources up and running.
So Rob gave you the best possible technical answer in terms of policy and infrastructure. It is incredibly complicated. I want to give you the human answer. This most recent storm system is the 4th disaster in 6 years. Most of it happening in the 5th district in the mountains that Bruce and I have had to bear. And we have no problem with that, but the people out there are suffering. I just want to acknowledge that. It's really difficult to take call after call of those folks who've been out of power and are still out of power and are freezing. So we've done our best to try to get resources available in community warming centers, hotel vouchers. Those are available even now for Fifth District residents, and also Bonnie Doon in the Third District in the mountains. If you're listening to this, we do have resources for that. But it's been really hard, and to try to serve them has been really difficult, and there's no one answer. Yeah, it's been really hard, so just wanted to
Okay, a couple questions from our online audience. This is from John Hunt. From 3CE's perspective, what are the pros and cons of sourcing from large regional grid-dependent projects as opposed to distributed locally generated sources like rooftop solar?
Thank you, John. I think it's really about how do you get to that goal of 100% clean and renewable as fast as possible. So 100 megawatt project that we can develop, that's going to serve 110,000 homes. So there is a question about how quickly you can do those. We have 1,000 megawatts of projects that have come online. We're able to do that cost effectively and much, much faster than if I went by home to get the homeowner to make a decision. And I actually think Ben Eichert has been quoted. He was looking at a project in Monterey County that Granite Rock did. They did a 20 megawatt development of a solar facility on their property. And I was reading the article in the Monterey Weekly, and I couldn't find myself agreeing more, which is this 20 megawatt project is so important because it can generate so much more power. And this is something our CAC chair had a very big role in it. It can generate so much more power than a single rooftop. And it's going to generate that without the need of going door by door and getting individual decisions to make that change. And that same logic applies to our programs as well. So if we do a 100 megawatt project or a 200 megawatt project, we're able to make that significant impact much, much faster at about, less than, if you move to that individual generation, into distributed generation, that's roughly 3, sometimes 4% more expensive, not 4%, 4 times more expensive than if you do it at the wholesale level. So it's about getting to an electrified grid as quickly and cost effectively as possible so that we can do all of the electrification. That said, as I mentioned a moment ago, distributed storage is an area that I think can be done cost effectively and is critical to be able to serve load on our distressed grid.
Okay, next question is from Brett Garrett. I'm just going to read this whole thing. I'm surprised that 3JC Prime 100% renewable hasn't been mentioned or promoted during this discussion, and I'm not aware of any effort to allow cities to make 3C Prime the default offering. Does 3C Prime help to get more renewables online overall, or is it does it just shift non-3C Prime customers to fewer renewables? How does 3C Prime relate to the discussion of RECs? I think it's very important to develop local resources to help reduce dependence on and costs of the transmission infrastructure. Policy needs to be changed so that locally generated energy isn't subject to transmission charges. I hope 3CE is supporting policy changes to eliminate over-the-fence rules, which create a barrier to creating community microgrids.
There's a lot there. Let me try to take it. The first one I think was around 3C Prime. So 3C Prime, we have 2 different service offerings. One is you come in at our default level, sort of reflective of the power content. You're at that 54% renewable. Or you can pay 0.8 of a penny more to get 100% clean and renewable energy. As we move to our goal in 2030 of being 100%, we need a discussion about what is 3C Prime going to be, because everybody then is getting 100% clean and renewable. Very small number of our customers are on 3C Prime. So the discussion of whether or not as communities come online, they should default to that, that's a local community decision. So our approach has been with every member agency. If that local jurisdiction votes and says, we want to default 100% of our jurisdiction constituents into 3C Prime, then we will bring it to our policy board, and our policy board can say, is that a good idea? But none of our members have done that. And what we've seen in jurisdictions where there have been those efforts, Orange County Power Authority, CPA has done it for a number of areas, and I think San Diego has done it as well, is after a few years, you start seeing folks opting out of the agency, or the jurisdiction says, never mind, let's go back to just the default rate. Because people don't opt down. They don't say, I don't want to pay 0.8 of a penny more. They just opt out. And I don't get a guarantee of customer return or customers being there. I'm not a monopoly like the IOUs, and I don't have a contract that binds customers to being there like an energy service provider would or a direct access provider would. So we need to be making prudent decisions, encouraging customers to go and make that additional effort. But really, I think getting them engaged with our programs is the right space for individuals to make that decision to help us decarbonize.
Thank you so much. We do have a couple more questions on the line, but I'm going to send those to Steph, and she can see if they get some kind of response. But I want to thank our panelists today. Really, it's a Saturday morning. I'm sure you all have things you want to do with your families and other kinds of things. So thank you all. We should have a round of applause for our presenters. We really do appreciate your participation in the programs. We're signing off. Behind everywhere else.
Peggy Flynn wanted me to make sure to say that our DWC March program is March 16th from 5 to 8 p.m. at Cabrillo College. And they can register by emailing Peggy at peggyflynn26@gmail.com. That's PEGGYFLYNN26@gmail.com. Or you can go on Eventbrite. Mailing is going out to the DWC membership on Monday. Registration is mandatory and no walk-ins. So, Carol, do you want to take us out? Okay. All right. That is our presentation for today. Thank you to all of our panelists again, and thank you to all of our online members.